Hey, good morning, everybody, and happy Transition Thursday. Hey, you know what? Today, I wanted to go back to a video I made about 2 years ago called The Top 10 Deal Pitfalls. It's my version after helping business owners sell businesses for 25 years or so. My top 10 deal pitfalls. And that video ran a little bit long. So today I wanted to just hit the top 10 in a much faster way so that you can get through it quickly and then start to maybe think about it and maybe go back to the video that's on YouTube that has a little more detail, a little more insight. So without further ado, here are my top 10 deal pitfalls for entrepreneurs that are selling their businesses when they are looking to retire or just when they're selling their businesses. Number one, and this is number one by a long shot, is indecision or the wrong mindset. So if you have the wrong mindset going into the sale of the business, you are going to have troubles right from start to finish. You're very likely to have a failed transaction. And I've had cases with people that are terminally ill, but they're not mentally ready to sell their businesses. And it has become such a difficult process. So that is clearly my number one issue that I have seen that leads to failed transactions. Number two, going solo. You see so few people selling their houses by themselves, for sale by owner on the, in front of their houses. And that's a house. Houses, with all due respect to my realtor friends, selling a house is nothing like selling a business. There are so many more moving parts and so many more complications, so many more issues that come up in due diligence and in negotiations. Going solo is foolish at the best of times. And if you're trying to save money on advisory fees or legal fees or whatever it might be, I think it's very short-sighted because you're going to lose value in the transaction and it's going to be highly frustrating. Unless you have a mom and pop operation, a very small business, and somebody comes to you and offers you a great price and you can sell the business easily. Number three in my list, being poorly organized. Not having your financial statements and the background that supports all the financial statements is a huge hindrance to getting a deal done. Not having contracts in place with key suppliers, key customers, key employees, not having retention bonuses or retention plans or confidentiality agreements with your key employees is going to hinder getting a transaction done. Next, there's two that are sort of 4 and 5 on my list. Number 4 is hiding problems from your advisor. And, we live and breathe confidentiality. If we don't keep things confidential the way that our clients expect us to, we're not going to be in business very long. So if you're going to share things with us or share things with your lawyers, you should expect that we're going to keep them confidential until such time as you want to share that with the buyers. So share it with us because that way we're prepared, or your advisors are prepared, your lawyers are prepared to deal with whatever that issue might be. Next point, number 5, is hiding those problems from a buyer. Now, there's certain times in the transaction, at the start of a transaction, you don't want to say, hey, by the way, I have this issue right at the very start. That sets the tone very poorly. But there is a time and place to share all of the ups and downs and pros and cons of what's going on in the business. So hiding from a buyer, it's going to come out eventually. It may come out in due diligence. Worst case scenario, it comes out after the deal is done and you have some sort of claim against your reps and warranties. So never a good deal. Never a good idea. Number 6 is, and I see this all the time, business owners get so distracted, so caught up with the transaction, they lose sight of actually managing their business. And so as you're going through a transaction, and I've said this before, transactions take anywhere from 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or even longer if some of these other issues haven't been dealt with. And so if you're distracted by the transaction and not focusing on the business, you're going to see a decline in the performance of the business right at the point in time where you're trying to say, hey, look, the business is doing well, it's growing, it's solid, etc. And yet the results are trending downwards right at the time that you want to show strength. So I always tell my clients, you focus on the business at hand. Have some people on your team, your CFO, maybe your managing director, if you have other senior executives, let them help us to deliver the due diligence materials and work with the lawyers and manage the data room. You focus on running the business. So that's number 6. Number 7, think about third-party consents. And this comes up usually a little bit later in transactions, but the later you wait to get those consents, the more power those suppliers, or for example, your landlord, have over withholding consent, maybe asking for new lease terms, etc. So the longer you wait, and if you wait till like the last week of a transaction before it closes, and you don't get the consent on time, that could delay the transaction, and it could frustrate the transaction altogether. Number 8, confidentiality. Now, as I said earlier, we live and breathe confidentiality. We treat documents that are provided to us as if they're our own. They're in on a secure server, or they're in a third-party virtual data room, which are highly secure. We don't, and I've said this in other videos, my wife doesn't even know some of the businesses we're selling. She knows the code names, Project, Purple, Project Brother, Project whatever. And that's really important because we don't want people in the community to know what we're doing. And quite often our transactions are confidential even after they're closed. In fact, in the mid-market, probably 80% of the transactions we close are not announced publicly. And so it's very important, not just before the transaction, but after the transaction, that we manage confidentiality. And I would stress, a lot of the breaches I've seen in the last 25 years have actually come from our clients. They've talked to their friends at the golf club or at a dinner party or something, and that just gets out and slowly kind of filters out in the business community. So be highly aware of that. Even your good friends may not appreciate the need for confidentiality in something that you've told them just in a casual conversation. Number 9, and this has happened a few times. It absolutely surprises me that this has happened even once, let alone several times in my career. And I call it going rogue. And this has happened when there's multiple shareholders in a business that is being sold. And one of those shareholders takes it upon themselves to go behind the backs of the other shareholders to talk to the buyers directly. And what they intend from that is pretty clear. They're looking for an advantage for themselves after the closing. And in one case, one of the shareholders convinced the buyer that after the closing, he should become the president of the business, not his fellow shareholder. And it caused a huge problem, not only for the shareholders, but for the business, because he was very much not the right person for that job. Now, number 10, and this is maybe a really important kind of catch-all for how you go through a transaction, and that is losing perspective. And quite often when I get into a transaction with a client and you're going through the due diligence, and it's highly stressful, and there's terms that are changing, there's ups and downs, and kind of give and take on any kind of transaction terms, and you start to lose perspective. And so losing perspective can really harm your chances of getting a deal done. And I'll give you an example. At the start of a transaction, a client might expect, and we might expect, that the value of the business is, let's just say for argument's sake, $10 million of enterprise value. And we run a process and we get lots of competition, hopefully, and lo and behold, we get offers at 12 million and 13 million, 14 million, something like that. So beyond what the client expected at the outset. And let's assume nothing else has changed. Well, what happens is now the client's starting to think, hey, my business is worth more and more. And then when some of the deal terms come up that become a little more, contested, they start to get really upset, and they fight for that 14 million, for argument's sake. And so it's my job to say, look, hey, if we give up on a couple of these terms, maybe it's not 14 million, maybe it's 13.5 million or 13.75 million. That's still way ahead of where we expected to be just 3 months ago. So let's put this into perspective. And maybe in the interim, there's been some tax structuring or some other things that have actually saved some tax. So your net proceeds, or I say cash in jeans, is going to be better regardless. So it's always good to kind of go back to where you started in the process. Look at where the transaction is. Look at the gives and takes that you've had to go through to get to where you are in the transaction. Just take a step back and decide if this is still what you want to do. And that does work the other way. Sometimes, you may expect 10 million and something happens in the business and the best offer you get is 9 million. So you got to step back and say, look, is 9 million, that's where the market is. We've run a competitive process. Is it worth taking, or should I wait another year, make the changes that seem to be needed in the business that the potential buyers didn't like? So having perspective is critically important. So those are my top 10. I hope you take them to heart if and when you plan a transition. If you're an advisor, I think these are also great great list for you to run through with your clients if they're in a process as well, if you find that things are getting off the rails. So that's it for today. As I say, look at my YouTube video if you want a longer explanation, but that's as quick as I can do my top 10. So have a great day, everybody, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.